Hello and welcome to See Hear Love. I'm your host, Melinda Estabrooks. Did you know that in Canada, 40% of married couples will divorce before their 30th anniversary, and that's from Stats Canada, and that 5 million Canadians have separated or divorced in the past 2 decades, according to our 2011 census. Wow. Well, today our theme is From the Brink of Divorce, and we're going to chat about those statistics and marriage with my lovely co-hosts to my right, Cheryl and Kimberly.
Hey.
Hi, guys. And also hear from an amazing and brave couple that were on the brink of divorce, really essentially almost ending their marriage, and how and why they worked hard, to stay together. And that couple is here with us today, Greg and Pam Sykes. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, Greg is a worship leader and an award-winning songwriter and recording artist with Integrity Music, and Pam is a mom, a set designer, a lover of children. We're going to talk about that throughout the interview, and a clean living blogger at CleanLifeHappyWife.ca. Thanks for being with us today, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Well, let me just throw this out. Those stats, those two stats, 5 million Canadians have separated and divorced in the past 2 decades, and 40% of married couples who will divorce before their 30th anniversary. How do you feel about that? What's your thoughts about that? Initial reaction? Like,
sad?
Yes.
That's the first word, right? Because you know that it means tons of pain. That doesn't happen without pain, right? So it's sad.
So sad?
It's heartbreaking, and I believe it because if you look around, if we look around our church, we look around even on our street.
Yeah.
The couple next door to us just divorced and had to sell the house and watch their little 2-year-old guy, pack up the moving truck and watch mom and dad go separate ways. It reminded me of being a kid. That happened in our home when my dad moved out. And man, but you know what? We got to keep going. We can keep going. There's life after that.
Yeah.
And so it's heartbreaking, but there's also more.
More. That's good. Yeah. Cheryl, what about you?
Sobriety. I feel like it's a wake-up call. I feel the sadness. I recognize that, but I also feel this sense of like, kind of call to arms. Like I feel like I just want to encourage the body of Christ to fight harder for marriages, as opposed to sort of throwing in the towel.
And Kim?
Yeah. Yes, all those things, and now I am divorced, so it feels funny when I say you need to fight harder when mine ended, even though there was a fight for it. It does happen, but it is sad. It does break my heart. It's too many. It's too much. It's too much when I think we can do something about it. But it's sad.
Good. You know, we're focusing on the two of you because you've got quite a story as far as your marriage, and you not necessarily unique, but within the context of ministry and being followers of Jesus. So let's start a little bit about the background on both of you, your love story, how you met, that magical day, the dress, all that. We want to hear that. That's fun stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And Greg's like, But talk to us, how did you meet, and how did, you both decided to get married, and talk a little bit about that background for you.
We were friends for years, and we would double date. Actually, remember that? Like, so the four of us
with the other people.
So I'm still, and we're still really close with each other's exes to this day. We're still friends because we were friends as couples, and then I think it was like maybe 2 years later we kind of both found each other. We were both single at the same time for the first time since we met, and then we were kind of like, wait a minute, do we like each other? So
Wow.
And at first, when I'd asked Pam to go out, not just for coffee as friends, but for a romantic time, she went, she said, "Can I get back to you?" I said,
She saw you in the friend zone.
Friend zone,
I expected her to say, "Yes, finally." And she really didn't. She said, can I get back to you? So I remember hanging up and talking to my buddy on the job site saying, "Pam said she needs to get back to me."
That's hilarious.
He said, "That's a sign of a good girl."
It is kind of a good girl.
And we were just friends for so long, and it caught me by surprise. I didn't see that coming, and then I just thought, I want to be careful, because if we dated and then it didn't work out, then I knew that would probably be the end of our friendship. So I thought, is this, do I want to risk that? So just needed a minute to think. And that is part of our relationship to this day. Greg is like an immediate solver, and I'm like a I just need to process, which makes it hard sometimes, right? But
So you're dating, you finally go on this date. I guess it's an important question, especially for those that are young or wanting to get married. What were your expectations about marriage? Because that's setting you up. This is going somewhere, right? You can see what's happening here. What were your expectations, real or not, as far as what married life would be? I mean, sex, but then aside from sex, what else?
That was my primary
Yes.
So
sex.
honest.
goal.
Yeah.
And then the rest were very equally selfish. I thought I need, fill in the blank, someone who can really take care of things. Pam's great at preparing meals. She's great at preparing events, and I remember her apartment was just like a magazine every time, and I thought that's what our home could look like, and it does. That's true.
Yeah.
But that was all consumer mindset. That was what can she do for me, and it that was very unfair to her for many years in our marriage, and was so unhealthy, so self-centered. Those were my expectations going into it, and that just about caused our marriage to train wreck until it finally got through to me that actually this marriage is quite the opposite. It's about what can I do to bring wholeness to her.
How many of us do exactly what you just said?
Absolutely.
Like we approach marriage with, like he's checking off all these boxes for me, or she is, and we think about how they can add value, but we're not thinking about what we can bring to the table, right? And the rubber hits the road at some point.
And that's the mistake I think a lot of people make, right?
Jesus came to serve and not to be served.
Yeah.
And that is not how I walked into our marriage, but how I need to. I need to serve. So.
Pam, what about you? So because for every, and I don't want to put the generalization of women, but you're thinking the wedding, the experience, the event, and then being with this person, and I don't want to fill in the blanks for you, but I'm just saying, what were your expectations going into marriage?
I mean, I just thought, he's perfect. He'll never be mad or angry. I thought as long as we love Jesus and love each other, we'll get along. And I would feel sorry for people who had trouble in their relationship, but felt so blessed that wasn't me. And that's
seriously what you went
that
into
was how
it.
I went into it. Like,
that's what we do.
This is going to be great because we're doing the right thing. We love God. We love each other. We're serving in our church. What could go wrong? That's what I thought.
Women are eternal romantics, so we fall in love with the idea of marriage and wedding and event. But forget that there's an actual pulse and a heartbeat and a person with dreams of their own, and it's.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm thinking about how many women the time spent for the wedding day.
Oh yeah.
The energy expended. The money, everything about the day, more than the actual work of thinking after that day, what is that going to look like?
That's right.
Yes.
So you get married.
And it was a beautiful wedding because I was there.
Okay. we have a witness. It was a beautiful. So not to downplay that your day wasn't great.
Yes.
So you get married, and then what happens?
I think it was the first day of our honeymoon.
I hear that a lot. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it was all the stress, just boom. I don't really know how. I don't even remember what, but I remember us getting in a giant fight in our hotel room in the Dominican, and I remember he stayed in the room, and I went and walked by myself on the beach, and I was just in my head thinking, well, what's going on? Trying to pull it together, okay? Maybe this is just a one-time thing. It's the stress of the wedding, and
And this is on your honeymoon?
This is day one.
Not even the end of the honeymoon. This is day one of the honeymoon.
Day one.
Okay.
Yes. So, and then it just really didn't get better from that point on, actually.
For a long time.
Honesty. For years, actually. It was just, then it's hurt on top of hurt, and we were a disaster. I remember thinking at our first anniversary, that felt like the longest year of my life, and I thought we will never make it to even to think of 5 years of repeating that. I thought I cannot.
Can I ask you, Pam? Was it I'm sure people are wondering. Was it a personality thing? Was it a power struggle thing? What was wrong at the time?
I think for us, a lot of it was kind of what we already touched on, bringing in unrealistic expectations, and then the hurt and disappointment that brings, then coupled with family baggage that you bring in, upbringing differences where, you know, there were certain things I just assumed because that's the way I was raised that everyone did, and then he's assuming the same, and I'm thinking, and then we're both thinking, well, no, that's wrong, and then we were not good I mean, all of that, we didn't communicate well, we didn't argue well, we both. It was just a disaster in every possible way. So every issue on top of every issue just got worse and worse. And then you're living in this tension where you don't even like each other. And then every little thing's getting on each other's nerves. And
just builds and builds.
And it's hard to get out from under that.
Yes.
And it was really, really hard to get out from under that.
So I guess the question, I say this honestly because, you know, for me personally going through a divorce, we kept a lot of our issues very private because I'm in ministry and I'm a Christian. Talk to me about that, because I think there are a lot of people, and whether it's in ministry or not, a lot of that comes with shame and embarrassment that your marriage isn't working. So you're having these problems. How come you're not sharing? How come this isn't getting resolved year after year after year? What was going on?
You know, I think we've probably all believed the lie at some point in our life that if they only knew, ... we would lose credibility, we lose respect, we lose our job, or we lose. And so there came a point about 5 years ago now where I lost my voice, and needing it to speak and to sing, I took a real blow to my pride. I had to take 3 months off where the doctor wasn't sure I'd ever be able to sing again. I couldn't sing, and I could actually hardly talk. And so, in many ways, it was a blessing for Pam to finally, actually.
That is so what I would do. I would be like,
Lord, you've answered my prayers.
okay, Greg, we love you.
Greg, we love you. We love your voice, and we love.
You got your voice.
But yes, go ahead. So then, keep going.
So, actually, many women could probably say, I could handle my husband having no voice for a few months. And it was actually profoundly healthy. It was.
Okay.
I had recognized in that season that I had a lot of pride attached to my ability to be able to communicate what I wanted to say or sing. And I was forced to be okay with, if this is how it needs to be, I can still worship, I can still have relationship, but I need to use my actions. And a pastor years ago sent this to me, who is now our pastor, Herm Plett in Niagara Falls. He texted me when he heard about what was going on. He said, Psalm 23 says, He makes me lie down in green pastures, and He restores my soul. And he capitalized makes. And so in that season, I said, God, I choose to believe that you are going to restore me in this. And it turns out it was so much more than about me. It gave us time to identify, hey, my marriage is falling apart. I might have it all together on the outside, musically, and at our church and in business, people think things are going well. But at home, where it matters, behind closed doors, it's a mess. And so in that time, we got real honest with our pastor. We saw a marriage counselor, and I began to write songs out of that season. Our pastor's wife said, in the season with no voice, you should really be writing songs. And I said, you're crazy. But I began to list all the things that I had to be thankful for, and my wife, and the kindness of God, and the mercy of God, the forgiveness of God. And the song came out that ended up teaching the first Sunday I got my voice back, and sharing the testimony of how I believe God can restore all things. He wants to restore our marriages, and we need to be honest about it. And the person preaching at our church that weekend asked me to tell the story of our marriage being just about over, but how God is beginning to heal. And I said, are you sure I can share that in front of, there's a lot of people that come to this church, and it goes online, and we're gonna admit that our marriage wasn't and isn't great? And she said, yeah, and it ended up being one of the most powerful services. I can't even explain how many emails and Facebook messages we got from people in our church saying, thank you for being honest.
Yes.
What counselor did you go see? Our marriage sucks too. Can you help us? And so Pam became this marriage counselor to so many women in the church.
You didn't sign up for that, right? Scary. I know, it is scary. So Pam, I'm saying, with Greg, he's saying his voice, but as a woman, because you've got girlfriends, and I say this because, again, from personal experience, but so this is going on a long time, but you're keeping it hidden, and why? Like, why do we do that? Why do we keep it silent, and we're not sharing and getting the help that we need? And then you look at a statistic like 40% of married couples will divorce before their 30th anniversary. And you can see that if you don't share and things keep going, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what was going on there?
Well, I think there was two things. One is, and I still believe in this to an extent, but I really did have a hope that things would get better. Even when there were days where I was feeling very desperate, like it wouldn't, still a piece of me did. And I was always afraid that if I said too much, if I forgave, other people wouldn't be able to. And other people would never understand, and they would never look at us the same. And that was something that I was always afraid of. And I do actually still think that it is important, even when you're being honest, to still be careful how and what you share, just because you do still want to protect your spouse.
Yes.
The other thing is too, though, is that I did reach out to a couple close people, but people don't know what to do. And after I realized, then I actually felt embarrassed and I felt stupid because I felt like I shouldn't have said it. Then I felt like they kind of got uncomfortable, like, because they're overwhelmed. They're not professional counselors. Yeah. So and that was actually kind of hurtful too. And I had to work through that and realize, you know what, I'm not going to give up. That was not the right channel to go down, but it's okay. So then we went the professional track, and I just thought, you know what, of course, you can't expect people who have no training in this to know what to do. I don't know what to do either, clearly. So then we kind of went the professional route, which I felt like was a lot more successful. But yeah, that was sort of those two things were happening at the same time. So.
It's fascinating because when it got so bad, a lot of people would just say, we're done. Like, it's too hard. You can justify all the means to end a relationship. Yes. Why didn't you? I mean, you're really on the brink. It doesn't sound like great years together. It's also hard on top of the ministry God part and what people are going to think of you, and you're a worship leader, and I mean, you know, you're known in sort of the Christian circle. Because in some ways people would say it'd be easier just to end. What was it? What kept you?
Well, I mean, in complete transparency, there were times when both of us did say, we're done. Like, this is done. And then thankfully, by the grace of God, we cooled down and pulled ourselves together. And I mean, I don't know for you, but for me, I sort of would get angry, like, you know, almost at maybe the devil, or I don't know who, but I would just feel like, I don't think so. Like, I wanted to be married and for my marriage to work out, and I am not giving up on that. It just would, and that's more my personality. Like, I don't like to let go of stuff like that. And then I just thought, even if I have to live in misery for, I don't know, however many years, like, I am not giving up. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I committed to. And I am not being committed just because there's these issues. My commitment was separate from the issues. They weren't tied together. So I was committed even though I hated it, and I hated being married, and I didn't even like him as a person many times, and I'm sure he felt the same about me. But like, I felt like that was separate from my commitment. So a lot of times I was doing it just for commitment's sake and not for any desire of my own.
So, okay, so this is so fascinating to me because I feel like this is going to speak to so many people, this show. When you talk about it being over, I hear over and we're at the end and 911. Can you define that for me? What did it look like when it felt like it was completely over? What was happening at the time? Was give me sort of like were you not speaking? Were you in separate houses? Like what? Just define that for us. That end of the rope before God rescued the whole thing.
Oh, like it got bad. Greg was at a hotel, so we were. So from year 1 to year 10 or 11, maybe even. I mean, it's gone better and worse. Like, it's gone up and down, right?
Which is marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that.
Yeah. So, and I still, like, we're not like a success story where we're like, and now we've figured it out, and it's all amazing. It's still, but I feel like we've figured out how to work through our issues better in a more healthy way. But yeah, it was Greg's at a hotel. We're not living together. We're not speaking. Wow. We're saying horrible things to each other that we don't mean, or maybe we do mean in the moment, but we shouldn't be saying anyways. Like, oh yeah, it was not, I mean, talking about what we'll do with our kids, visitation, how we're gonna.
So you're already having these
proceed.
conversations.
Oh yeah.
And you know why I ask this? Because I really feel in my heart that there's someone watching or a group of people watching that almost define bad marriage by their own standards. So they do this. We're not in a bad marriage because we're not living separately yet. We're not in a bad marriage because we haven't used the word divorce. And so we sort of think, oh, we lied to ourselves. But you were saying just ill treatment, just speaking horribly one to the other, wanting to inflict hurt.
Yeah.
Those are signs that we're in a bad place. And maybe this is a great moment for someone to almost kind of like do a checklist of like, wow, we need some work.
Yeah.
It's not just the walking out the door with the suitcases, like that's the final, but there's like a sort of this
signs.
spiraling down that happens.
Yes, like the slow.
Yeah, because you're here. Okay, so we're at this place. It sounds like you are the brink of divorce. And then Greg, talk to me too now. Like, you know, Pam saying it was the commitment separate from the issues. There was a lot of issues, but I was committed, and that's, some people can do that. For you, what was it?
It was the moment when I realized that the problem wasn't Pam. She will admit that there were things that she needed to work on, but I truly identified that even if I take the easier temporary route, step out of this, and try to find someone else, they're going to be flawed too, and I'm going to still be the same selfish mess, and I'm going to wreck that marriage too, unless I fix the holes in my own life.
Yes.
And there were a number of them. So I got to work, and I'm still in the middle of work. And there's things that I did this morning that if I could go back, I would speak with more love to Pam on the drive here. But I'm getting better. I'm being redeemed. With the strength of God, the power of the Holy Spirit, and also my two hands and my own brain that He's given, I can make some change too. And so it's interesting how everything changes when I take my eyes off what I see as flaws in Pam, and spend that time focusing on what can I do to outserve her? What can I do to improve the way that I'm living? That was the turning point for me.
Yeah, that's good. Kim, your thoughts?
Oh, I'm like on the verge of total sobbing right now because these are my friends and I've been there, but I was in a marriage that wasn't redeemed, that did end in divorce, and some people do. It's some things happen, some things you fight for that you can't fix. But God is so good and so faithful. And can I just tell you, I'm gonna tell you this little story, that God brought along, after 8 years of being a single mom, the love of my life. I love Him better than I thought, but you're still walking into marriage. It's still marriage. There's two people's lives, but I have found kindness and respect and saying thank you, and is there anything I can do for you today? Changes your whole entire day.
Yeah.
And when you enjoy one another and do exactly that, serve and can go, what can I do for you today? I have moments where I'm home, but the minute he walks through the door, I'm like, I don't need to be on him. How are you? What can I do for you today? Kindness and respect. So I married the love of my life. And when I walked down the aisle that day, that afternoon, Greg sang that song, Faithful, that he wrote with no voice. In that season where he had no voice, he wrote this song that has wrecked me over and over in my desperate moments where I thought, God, I would never know love again, on my floor, listening to it for 4 hours in my kitchen, and sang Faithful when I walked down the aisle for the second time in this season. But these are the greatest people. I love their story. I love this story.
We don't have a lot of time, and we could be here for like hours. But here's the thing. I think why we still wanted you here is because I think it's important for people to say, we're not going to just share stories where now we're great, now we're all fixed. That's not the journey with Jesus. It's messy, and it's a continual learning and other-centeredness and selflessness. Like, the stories aren't about, now we've arrived, now we've got all of, the advice to do it. In this last time, I just, like Cheryl was saying, there are people watching and they're at the brink. There are people that don't realize that they're going there because they're being selfish, and they don't realize that this could lead in 1 month, 2 months, a year, 2 years to this. What would you say? What's your encouragement to them? and to us, because I mean,
Yes.
again, we're all married.
all in it.
Both of us a second time. Cheryl for 2 years. What would you say to us?
There's one thing I would say to men first in particular. I was called on this by a male counselor a couple years ago, and it changed my perspective of our marriage. He said, you are not emotionally connected to Pam, you're not physically connected to her enough, and you're not spiritually connected. And I'm talking intimacy, spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy. So he said one thing you can do practically is do daily physical, emotional, and spiritual intimacy. So the past few weeks, I have train wrecked on this, but for about a year and a half, every single day, we committed to pray together, and that's our job to lead that. We pray together. We schedule physical intimacy, which men, that is fun. and three,
And important.
Yeah.
and three, we do daily emotional intimacy, which is talking about how's your heart?
Yes.
And me being brave enough to open my heart and talk about how I'm feeling. And you can even Google emotional intimacy, and there's exercises to do that will literally open your heart and reconnect you to your spouse. So those 3 daily activities would be a very practical thing to do.
So
Those are
good.
really good.
that.
So that's for men, but I mean, really for either way,
But I
yeah.
want to call men to say,
Yes.
you initiate that.
Yeah. Amazing. And then Pam, what about you?
The thing that is first popping in my head right now is just that to remember that you can do hard things
Yes.
Yes.
with God's help. And you know what? Like, none of us like to sit in the mess, but I was telling Greg this, there was a moment about a year ago when we were in Florida, we were on a family vacation, I was sitting on the beach, Greg's playing with our 2 kids in the water, and it just hit me so hard that had I given up at any one of the points along the way, that I would not be in that moment right now. Like, that moment wouldn't exist, that vacation wouldn't exist, that memory, that amazing day that we had with our kids would have never happened. And it was such a reminder to me that to not be afraid. Don't be afraid of weeks or months, or in our case, years of hard. We want to just run away from the hard. I know I did. You can't. Just stick it through, and there's amazing reward at the end. And just not to give up so easily. You know, of course there's unsafe situations where you've got to leave, absolutely. But there's times when, just to remember, like, you can do hard things. If it's hard every day, you can do it. You don't have to give up. And
That's good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Woo!
Yes.
Every person watching and on the brink of divorce, there you go,
yes.
right? That's honestly, thank you so much. These are important conversations. I mean, we thank you for your bravery and your vulnerability. This is not easy. Nobody wants to share the yucky secret stuff, especially in our own home. And so we just want to thank you for doing that. And I really appreciate, even personally for me, you know, in a second time, you know, they say that the statistics are even higher for divorce in a second marriage if you don't deal with you.
Yeah.
Because if you're blaming everybody else
so
and you're the
true.
constant,
That's
it's
right.
me. And so thank you for that reminder, because I need to know that again and again. Well, thank you too, Cheryl, Kim. Thank you for your thoughts. And I think that was a good reminder too, that watch and listen and look within your own marriage, right?
Yeah.
For those warning
Great.
signs. That was really good. And Kim, thanks for sharing on your journey as well. Appreciate that. And to you viewers, we acknowledge together that marriage is hard. It's tough. It's not easy. And it demands complete sacrifice from both partners. Selflessness, laying your life down for one another, being equal and together. And it may take counseling, what Pam and Greg said, it's going to take some professional help and better communication and intentionality. And from what we heard today, the willingness to trust God in all things and in all ways. And just like Kim said, you know, Kim and I witnessed that God is good and a God of second chances and redemption. For us, we did find love again. It was a hard road for both of us, but we are thankful and humbled by this gift. And if there was anything you heard today that you want to talk about further, or you want prayer, please connect with us on seehearlove.com or send us a message on Facebook, because we would love to pray and direct you to resources that can help you in your marriage and relationships. And always know that you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God. Bye.